we gonna hit this town. Been a long time coming, been a long, hard drive. Gonna smoke some, gonna drink some, gonna find a little trouble living. Now we're gonna make some.
Welcome back to the Four and Field podcast, our third episode, and we're gonna break down the second Charlotte race, and we're gonna dive into the Bristol race on Sunday. Towards the end of the podcast, we'll get our picks. But I want to just start out, we do have a new member today. His name is Brandon Stringer. Brandon, how you doing?
Well, I was doing terrible this morning, but tonight I'm great. I'm not pepper spray no more, so we can survive.
So, a little background on that. Brandon is currently in the United States Navy, so currently serving for us. We thank you for your service, Brandon.
Thanks. I've been hearing that the last 4 years. I'm about tired of it now.
Well, we just had to get that out there here from the Four and Field podcast. We always appreciate it.
Clickbait.
Steve, how's it going?
Going good as always, man.
Wes?
I'm doing great. How's it going, Don? How are you?
It feels great to be asked that. Not a lot of people ask me since I'm the host. I'm feeling good tonight.
Good. We've always got to check on the host.
You care about you, keep Dom. It's okay.
Yeah.
You might talk a lot of crap about Denny Hamlin, but we still love you.
Hey, we got the Denny Hamlin hat on, Denny Hamlin shirt on. You probably can't see that, but Kevin, how's it going?
I was doing good until Brandon got in here, and then I was like, oh, man. But, hey, it's all good. It's all good. We're doing good over here.
Oh, man. Sounds like we're in for a fun episode tonight on the Four and Field podcast. I think we should get into one of the more exciting things in the NASCAR world right now. And obviously everybody looking at Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch. On Tuesday night, they raced together in the Truck Series. Chase Elliott looking for that bounty. A lot of people referring to him as the bounty hunter. I think it's a little overdone. But Chase Elliott did beat Kyle Busch, got that $100,000 bounty, and at the end of the race took the checkered flag and did Kyle Busch's signature bow. Now, Wes, do you think that could maybe add fuel to a potential rivalry between Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch?
I don't know if it would add too much fuel, but I think it adds a lot more entertainment behind it, because it's not really a rivalry that I think is going to last too much the rest of the year besides the way that they drive each other on the racetrack. I think for the most part it's going to be pretty clean because they do have a lot of respect for each other. But I think it's going to be entertaining because whenever we see them around, we're going to think back to the Charlotte week and we're going to think back to the Darlington weeks that we just had with the trucks and with the Cup Series. So I think it is something that we'll see a lot more talked about throughout the rest of the year, especially where we're going to see them go in the chase, depending on how far they go, if they even make it to the Final Four, because if they both do, I think that'll kind of be brought up again, unless we see something else happen between the two, between then and now. So we'll have to see, but right now it's definitely a good little bit of entertainment value added to the picture, and it definitely helps boost the sport because Chase is, of course, the fan favorite. You've got the bad guy in Kyle Busch, and they're both kind of the talk of the sport right now.
Kevin, I kind of want to bring this, I know you're a big college football guy. Now, you go to Michigan State. Say Michigan and Michigan State are playing, and Michigan scores, and, say last year Shea Patterson does some, signature, Spartan move after a touchdown. Does that really add fuel?
In that situation, it definitely does. It definitely adds fuel to the fire, especially since, the history between the two teams and two colleges. That would definitely add a lot of fuel to the fire. I think with this and with Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch, there's not really there's obviously a little bit of history there, but right now there's not too much of a history there. So right now it just looks kind of like a playful jab back and forth. But, yeah, that's kind of my take on the whole thing.
And Steve, you're a fan of Chase Elliott. What do you think of the move?
I thought it was pretty entertaining. Like Chase Elliott said after the race, it was just kind of a spur of the moment move, but I got a good kick out of it. I think Chase really respects Kyle Busch, and I think that he just you know thought it'd just be a fun little jab at Kyle, and he collected that $100,000 bounty, and I didn't see any harm in it.
And Brandon, I'm going to change the topic a little bit. So, do you think maybe Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch maybe took away from the truck regulars that race, because the main focus of that race was really just on Kyle Busch and the bounty, and it just turned into Chase Elliott versus Kyle Busch?
I mean, I want to say it took away from the spotlight from the rest of the truck regulars, because say one of the truck regulars would have beaten Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch, it would put more eyes on them for beating the two Cup regulars. But just getting eyes on the truck series isn't a bad thing. So why not have two Cup regulars at the time? Try to go for a bounty and do it for a good cause, because they did it for the COVID-19. So I really don't think it was a bad thing, because I think Zane Smith finished third, I think, in that truck race.
Mm-hmm.
So it showed that he can keep up with the two Cup regulars. So I don't think it was a bad idea.
Yeah, and Zane Smith made a big move on Kyle Busch. Actually made it 3 wide, got back by him toward at the beginning of that last run. And some of these guys, I've been a big fan of these Cup guys going into the lower series and racing. I think it helps the lower series drivers. You get to see what the Cup competition is like, and I think that could be why Cole Custer, Tyler Reddick, and maybe Christopher Bell just haven't been as strong as they could be right out the gate, because they're not used to this competition right now in the Cup Series. So I think, getting those guys in there, Kyle Busch racing, when Kevin Harvick would race, it would help the lower series guys, because they know what to expect and the higher competition once you get to the Cup Series. So I'm going to transition that, let's get back into the Cup Series. We've done 4 races, 2 at Darlington, 2 at Charlotte, since the return for NASCAR. And 2 races have resulted in lap 1 incidents. Steve, do you think this has anything to do with the lack of practice time?
I think it very well could be. We saw at Darlington, it was noted before the race that Quinn Houff had never run any race at Darlington. The only experience he had of any kind was iRacing, and that led to a big checkup on lap 1. You're seeing a lot of these guys with little to no experience at some of these tracks really struggle at the beginning of the race because of no practice. So there were a couple scenarios that I saw some NASCAR fans put out on Twitter, maybe like a rookie only, or if there was some way that they could determine less experienced guys make a practice session only for them. But I think definitely the less experienced guys do struggle more with the limited practice. So and now, especially this weekend, come up to one of the toughest tracks at Bristol. That's definitely going to be an interesting start to that race.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, say I gave you a iRacing simulator, told you to go out to Darlington with no practice. You've never touched iRacing in your life. How do you think you do going in there with 39 other guys going into turn 1, and you're in the middle of the field?
I'd probably spit on the apron and write the whole field. So I don't know what I'd be doing. So I think definitely not having any practice is somewhat of a huge factor to why we're seeing so many wrecks in the beginning of the race, mostly from guys that aren't experienced. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing guys that aren't experienced being involved in the wrecks early in the races.
And Brandon, are you surprised with the drivers that have wrecked on lap 1? It was Ricky Stenhouse at Darlington, and then we saw Joey Gase and Garrett Smithley wreck at Charlotte. Are you surprised with any of those guys being the cause of lap 1 incidents?
Honestly, I'm not surprised at all. Actually, when they came back from the first race at Darlington, my bet was that Ricky Stenhouse would probably cause or be involved in the first wreck on lap 1. I was right. But I think in this instance, practice probably would help, especially with the case of Kyle Busch in the Truck Series, having something broke in the car and not knowing about it before. They probably do need practice before these races because, like you said, Quinn Howard's never done a lap at Darlington. Some of these guys are inexperienced. Plus, you never know if you have a mechanical problem you can find beforehand. So I think practice probably should be necessary going forward if they try to implement it.
And Wes, do you think it's possible that they could get practices, done? Maybe even just like if it's a half hour. You think they could somehow start doing that with all the social distancing guidelines that are going down right now?
I feel like there's ways that they could work around it, but I feel like at this point, and we might talk about it a little bit later, I kind of like the way that we start these races without having any practice because it kind of gives everybody a fair playing field. And everybody has to go out and try to work on the car from the very beginning. Then again, it does put people at risk, especially some of those underfunded cars and teams like the Quinn House and like the Garrett Smithleys, because I think Garrett Smithley had a mechanical issue which caused his problem there on the very first lap of the race. And it's something that had they practiced, they might have been able to find and diagnose before they even got out on the track. But I feel like it does add a kind of entertainment value seeing these cars without any practice go out on the track. And then it gives opportunities for people that you may not see at the front, may be able to have their cars dialed in from the very beginning and be able to find their way towards the top 5 or the top 10. So I don't know. I think it's something that they could try to work in if they wanted to. Maybe they could do single practice runs where a car goes out for maybe 5 laps, just gets a few test laps in just to keep it shorter and just space it out. So then it's maybe a 3-hour time block where it's not really taking up too much time for each team, or it's not just an hour where everybody's out on the track and it puts everybody at risk of potentially getting in a wreck and then having to find a backup car. And so just different ideas right there. But it's something they could play around with. And I think that maybe with this month and the next month upcoming, we'll be able to figure out kind of a better plan of what they want to do.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what they could do. I know they're not doing anything. They may have a practice session or qualifying session for Talladega on June 21st, but that is still to be determined. I think, like you said, I think it adds to the entertainment value. I think just having everybody go out there blind, not knowing what their car is like, is pretty good. And it kind of lets, the talent kind of rise to the top there towards the beginning of the race, because if you're able to figure out your car early, it could come down to experience, which also helps. And, it also makes the team have to work harder during the race. You have to make more changes. You're not going in there with the perfect car and you're making minimal adjustments just to keep up with the track. Not only are you trying to keep up with the track, you're trying to make the adjustments you would be making on, Friday during practice. So all of that kind of adds the entertainment value. And speaking of that, Kevin, I'm going to start with you. What have you thought of the inverts? The top 20 being inverted when they go to the track again the second time in the week.
Personally, I like the invert. Like how you're saying earlier, talking about the kind of excitement factor. I think it does provide a lot of excitement because you have guys that usually sit in the back and they or mid pack, I guess you could say. Now they're up in the lead and it provides more of a challenge for the guys in the back to try to weave the way throughout the field. And I think it provides a lot of good and exciting racing, especially early on.
And Brandon, what do you think this invert does for teams like, you had Michael McDowell starting third, Ty Dillon start on the front row for a race. Do you think this helps those underfunded teams maybe get more exposure, or, just maybe even be better because they're toward the front for a change?
I do think it helps the underfunded teams because, like you said, Ty Dillon, Michael McDowell are toward the front, guys you normally see toward the front. And you can see that the cars – see if they can actually handle being up there or they just fall right to the back. But I think, plus for sponsorship-wise, it gets more eyes on the cars too, like for Geico, I love Truck Stops, getting sponsors for them. So I think it was good at the – plus, I think it was good to do 1 through 20 instead of 1 through 40. So you don't want like the 40th place – well, say the 36th place running car starting first, but the 20th place running car probably won't be big as a deal. So I think it's a good idea.
Definitely don't want Quinn Houff leading the field to green. Definitely not ideal.
At Darlington.
So yeah, definitely 1 through 20. I think that's your best benchmark. The 20th place cars should be, up to speed to where they don't, become a hazard toward the front. We did have William Byron get to start on the pole because of it. So I think it worked out pretty well. And Wes, do you think this could be something NASCAR continues to do maybe, in the future?
It's going to be interesting to see if they keep this structure aflow in the future, just because if we get back to normal, depending on what time that's going to be, I don't know if they're going to try to fall back on the rules that they've had in the past, or if they do kind of what they've been doing now, actually listening to the fans and seeing what people want. Because I think Brad Keselowski was the one that spoke out on Twitter about how he thought this format was interesting, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there's more NASCAR drivers that kind of speak out about it, kind of raise awareness, and the fans continue to speak their word, depending on if they like the format or not, this could be something that NASCAR could easily adapt. It would be interesting to see, especially going forward, seeing that it could definitely have championship implications. It could have race winning implications. It could have, of course, stage winning implications. Pretty much it changes the whole complexion of race week from what we see now, because like you mentioned earlier, Dom, a lot of cars just show up and they're already tuned and ready for their whole race, and it doesn't really give the underfunded teams a chance to be able to shine or show off their sponsors. And I feel like that's been a big issue with NASCAR sometimes, that sponsors, especially with the lower funded guys, don't really get shown. They don't get that recognition on the TV. And of course, the top 20, it's not showing everybody, but at least it shows some. So I feel like it can definitely be a beneficial factor to the sport, but they definitely need to take it into consideration. And like I mentioned, I think people just need to speak about it.
And Steve, I just want to talk about the beginning of the races real quick. Do you think NASCAR needs to lay off the competition cautions every race right now? Because it's been kind of, lap 25, it's just been a given for a competition caution. Do you think they need to keep these, maybe push it back, or just kind of get rid of them for now?
I could understand it for if they're doing a double header week. I could understand maybe doing it for the first race, just seeing how the tires wear and just give the teams a good sense of what their equipment looks like. But I don't think it needs to happen at every race. In my opinion, I say that NASCAR should just lay off the competition cautions, just let the boys go out there and race and see what happens. And if something, if something happens. But I think there's been too many competition cautions, and maybe it's time to lay off of them a little bit.
Like I feel like NASCAR will probably have a competition caution at Bristol on maybe lap 40, and I just feel like that's just unnecessary. I think you just go out there, you race. I mean, you look at the Coke 600, half the field didn't pit anyway. So I mean, it's not like people are concerned about tires. They're not concerned about the tires falling apart and the track being different than before. And we're going to get into some tires later. But, yeah, I think the competition cautions, I think I agree with Steve. They need to be laid back. Needs to stop happening because we're having some good racing at the beginning, but this first stage is short enough. I mean, the first stage on Thursday night was 30 laps and there was a competition caution on lap 15? We don't need to split the run into half. It's just not needed. Hopefully they lay back on them and we'll get, more green flag racing. And let's go into the Coca-Cola 600, not the Coke 600, the Coke 500K, the Alsco Uniforms 500. A very short race. Turned long, time-wise because of the about just over an hour rain delay. Kevin, what did you see in comparison to the Coke 600?
Personally, I saw a lot of improvement from the Coke 600. I saw a lot more passing, a lot more guys being aggressive and, trying to move their way up through the field. And I think it was a lot better of a product than what we saw during the Coke 600. And I think a lot of that had to do with the shortened race, guys like, okay, I can't just lay back here now. Like, we got to go. We got to try to get some points. So I think it was good to see, especially comparing it to the Coke 600.
And Steve, do you think the improvement in racing was, just because it was shorter, because the drivers had more experience, more laps on the track? What do you really, give the reasoning to, seeing more passing and more action?
Well, I think like Kevin hit on it, it's a much shorter race. There was 400 laps in the Coca-Cola 600 and only 208 in Thursday night's race. So there's a lot of anticipation and urgency to get up towards the front because the stages aren't 100 laps anymore. They're a lot shorter than that. So guys were trying to pass and get up into that top 10 for those all-important stage points. So making these shorter races, that's definitely going to ramp up the urgency because there's not much time to make adjustments on your car, not much time to just kind of ride around and click off laps. You need to go right from the beginning and hopefully get up towards the front.
And, we have, Brandon, if you guys don't know, is a Matt Kenseth fan. So I'm going to ask him this. Brandon, ever since that first race at Darlington where Matt Kenseth finished 10th, he has been off the map. What is going on with the oldest driver in the field?
Man, I wish I could tell you. After the first race at Darlington and he finished 10th, I thought, okay, he's been out the car for about 18, 19 months. So I guess all the rust probably been knocked off after the first race. But since then, he's like just falling off the cliff. He's had tire issues, loose wheels, slow pit stops. He had a speeding penalty in the Coke 600, had a commitment line violation in the Osco 500. So it's just a combination of a lot of things going wrong at the wrong time for Matt. I think he'll turn it around, especially this week at Bristol, which is traditionally his best track. He has 4 wins there, I think. So he can turn around them. But since the first Darlington race, it's just been a struggle for Matt.
3 flat tires since he's come back. What's the deal with the tires? You think it's Matt? You think it's Goodyear? What's going on?
It has to be. It can't be Matt, I don't think, because with this current car, you're not really driving it. Like, say with the older cars, they have more horsepower, so there's a higher chance of burning the rear tires off. But with this cars, you're just like wide open in the corner. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. That's burning the tires off so fast. I think in the Oscar 500 when he trying to avoid Brad Keselowski, I think that had to do with him getting a flat tire. But for the Darlington race and the Coke 600, I couldn't even tell you what's going on with that. It's just maybe it's the compound that Goodyear's bringing to the track, or maybe the wrong air pressures, or maybe the sub they have on the car is just burning the tires off way too fast. Plus, he did hit the wall in the Darlington race, so that didn't help at all either. But I don't know what the issue is right now with Matt and tires. Just I couldn't even tell you.
Well, Matt Kenseth, I think we saw, the first discrepancy since he's come back, with that commitment line violation on the green. He was under the impression that he only needed 2 tires inside when you need all 4. I think that's where it kind of got him, in the loop, kind of got him thrown off. And Wes, I'm going to go to you. Do you think it's time to panic for the Joe Gibbs Racing teams outside of the 11 team? Because none of them have wins. Kyle Busch really hasn't been up there. Martin Truex Jr. has been way off if you're looking at Charlotte performance. And Eric Jones is not finishing up, toward the front. What's going on with the Gibbs cars?
It's hard to tell at this point in the season because it feels like at times we've seen speed, but a lot of the times it's been just track errors or some kind of mistake either by their pit crew or even by the driver itself. So I don't really know. It's been hard to tell, but I do feel like it's getting to a time where they need to crunch down. Hamlin, it seems like his team, for the most part, besides the incident that happened in the Coca-Cola 600, it seems like he's got things pretty well figured out. It seems like Truex is, besides, I guess, this race that we saw last night, it seems like he's getting back in the right direction. He's still been able to lead some races. He still has had a little bit of speed. Kyle Busch, he's just hasn't been able to find the consistency. I'm a little worried about Eric Jones. We talked about it before the show. I feel like he's the one I'm most concerned about, not only being in a position to where Christopher Bell is knocking on the door, potentially being in the 20 car, But just the fact that every year it seems Eric Jones hasn't been able to nail the consistency, and there's been a lot of errors. So I feel like looking Kyle Busch and Eric Jones have not, including Truex as well, they're going to need to step up their programs in their own respective team, of course, with Joe Gibbs, and try to be able to find some kind of momentum to get through the rest of the season. Kyle Busch is almost outside of the top 16 in points. And I don't think he's ever been in a position where he's that low in points ever in his whole career, besides maybe a season early on, maybe with Hendrick. But we'll have to see what they can do. But I think Bristol's going to be a good test. They're all fare really, really well at Bristol, including Christopher Bell, of course, in the 95. Every single driver has been a competitor for a potential win, whether it be in the main series or the Xfinity series. So I think that these 5, if they're going to be able to get their foot in the right direction, this is a good track to look to. And I think that there's a chance they could all finish in the top 5, depending on how well they get prepared for, I guess, Sunday's race.
And Steve, how, going to, a surprising run, how big is this race for Ricky Stenhouse? Getting a 4th place finish, not by strategy, just based off of the performance of the car.
Yeah, we saw that 47 car be up front all night long on Thursday night's race at Charlotte. It was a really great run for Ricky Stenhouse and that 47 team. He hasn't had a top 20 finish before that race since Auto Club way back in March. So this was really a step in the right direction, hopefully, for Ricky Stenhouse and that team. We saw him lap 1 of the first Darlington race wreck, and since then has really been struggling, finding some speed. But like we saw Thursday night, they had a really fast car, and I look for him to be up towards the front at Bristol. It's one of his best tracks.
All right. Then one more team I want to talk about, Storehouse Racing. That team was, struggling. Brandon, I want to give this one to you. Outside of Kevin Harvick, do you think Storehouse Racing needs to consider some changes? Because the other 3 teams have been nowhere near Kevin Harvick, and it's, pretty exaggerated right now.
Well, before the season even started, I thought Storehouse Racing needed some change for drivers because personally, I don't rate neither Clint Boyer or Eric Almirola that highly. I think Clint Boyer's had almost 500 races now in the Cup Series, only has 10 wins in that time, and Eric Almirola only has 2 victories and both been in plate tracks. So, and with Cole Custer, he's a rookie. I don't think he's 22 yet, so I think we can just give him a little bit of time. But as for Clint Boyer and Eric Almirola, the time's taking on those 2, especially Clint Boyer. He's already in his 40s, I think. He might be 40 right now, and his contract's up at the end of the season. He also has Chase Briscoe, who's down in the Xfinity Series performing well. So he might need to look out because we see he does well in the Fox booth, and the Fox booth might be calling next year for him. And right now, it's he's like at Darlington he performed well. He won the first 2 stages, but as you see, he regressed in that race. Plus, he had a blown tire. I think it was in one of the shot. Was it the Oscar 500 and the Coke 600? One of the 2 races he had a blown tire, but just in general, I think Storehouse probably does need 2 new drivers for the 14 to 10 for next year.
Kevin, do you think Clint Boyer will or should end up in the Fox booth next year?
If he keeps driving like how he is right now, I mean, I know he's had some bad luck, but he also hasn't really been competitive when he hasn't had that bad luck. He looked good early in the season, or I mean, I guess I should say back at Darlington. He looked really good, but he hasn't really been good as of late. So, I mean, if this keeps up, I wouldn't be surprised to see them pull the plug on him, especially if his contract is up at the end of the year. You could very well see them not, renew his contract. And at that point, he might just retire because, he'll be old at that point. And you might see a 3-man booth with Mike Joy, Jeff Gordon, and Clint Boyer up there. So we'll see what happens, though.
Yeah, Clint Boyer could be a good replacement for DW. Just as crazy of a guy in there with the same energy, but, with experience in the past 20 years in the car. So, Steve, we're going to let you wrap up this Alsco Uniforms 500. Chase Elliott getting the win. How big is this win for him, and where do you see this team going moving forward?
I see this team really on the rise right now. I got to say, it was a big redemption win for Chase Elliott. I know as a fan of his for the last 35 laps when he took the lead from Kevin Harvick, I could just I was just sitting there holding my breath. I was waiting for the caution to come out or something to happen, someone to blow a tire, maybe Matt Kenseth or something. But it was. And then coming down to the white flag, it was a big relief. And then we saw coming to the checkered flag, Michael McDowell spin out, and I was right there with Mike and Jeff when they were saying, could you imagine if that happened a lap sooner? Just the rage against Michael McDowell. But it was a big redemption win for Chase from the Coca-Cola 600, and then obviously winning on Thursday night. So this team is really headed in the right direction. They're showing speed at every race, and really all the Hendrick cars are. So I look for the Hendrick cars to be right back up front on Sunday at Bristol.
So, yeah, we got a lot going on from Charlotte moving into Bristol. Now we're going to, make our picks for Bristol. Steve kicked our butts the last race at Charlotte. He picked Chase
I told
Elliott.
you guys to go with Chase Elliott. I don't know what happened, but I just told you.
I had that gut feel with Eric Jones, and Eric Jones got probably the dumbest penalty in the NASCAR rule book. I just can't believe you get held a lap for pitting outside the box. I understand it's a safety hazard, but if your rear tire is just outside the box when you're making a stop, does it really warrant a one-lap penalty when speeding could be more dangerous and you can only go to the tail end under caution? I just don't think it's warranted. But, I think I'm going to come back and get Steve this week. I think I'm picking the winner, but we'll save my pick for last. Kevin, who are we picking for Bristol?
Oh, boy. I think, Joe Gibbs, they've been struggling. Well, outside of Denny Hamlin, they've been struggling. But I think I got to go with Kyle Busch. He always seems to be kind of competitive there. And I feel like if there's any chat where he can kind of get the ball going again, I think Bristol is probably the track that he can do that. I believe he won there last year. So, look for him to be up there competing, assuming nothing goes wrong with his tires or, something else in the car. I think he could very well make a run for the win.
Brandon making his first ever pick on the Foreign Field podcast. Who's winning Bristol?
I have Ryan Blaney winning on Sunday. I think he'll finally live up to his teammates already won a race this year. Ryan Blaney's had speed all season, been in top 5, top 10, won stages. I think Ryan Blaney will finally get a win this year.
Did have that one really good run at the Food City 500 before getting collected in a wreck when Trevor Bayne caused a wreck in front of him while Blaney was the leader, had nowhere to go. And Wes, we got to catch Steve here. So who's winning?
Man, it's going to be a tough pick. I feel like we got to look out for two guys. Neither of my picks to win, but I feel like Matt DiBenedetto and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. are going to show up. Two guys that have momentum right now. Two guys that excel at Bristol, really fit well for their driving style. I think those two could actually be contenders for this race win because they have shown good speed this year. But my pick to win, 6-time winner at Bristol, it's going with Kurt Busch. I actually haven't picked Kurt Busch in a long time to win a race, but he's looked good as of late. He's got 3 top 5 finishes in the last 6 races, won this race back in 2018. It's probably the best track for him and his driving style too. And Chip Ganassi, in terms of what we've seen from Kurt Busch and a little bit from Matt Kenseth, but especially from Kyle Larson earlier in the year, I feel like Kurt Busch has a good shot to get back in victory lane. So I'm going Kurt Busch for, I wouldn't say really an upset pick, but somebody that I feel like would be picked a little later than a lot of other drivers that we see.
Kurt Busch, definitely a good pick. He's had 3 top 10s in these past 4 races. And that one race he didn't get a top 10 was the Coke 600, and he led the first, part of the race before the rain hit. So definitely not a bad pick. Kurt Busch, 6-time winner at Bristol. But my pick is going to be a first-time winner. He's going to send Wood Brothers to victory lane for the 100th time. Matt DiBenedetto is going to get redemption from last August after losing the lead with 12 laps to go to Denny Hamlin. Some say it was all because of Ryan Newman. I say Hamlin was going to catch him anyway. But, that's a debate for another day. Matt DiBenedetto gets the Wood Brothers back to victory lane for career win number 100. So we had Kevin with Kyle Busch, Brandon with Ryan Blaney, Steve. Who's Steve have again? I forgot.
I'm gone yet. I'm waiting.
We don't want him to
wow.
pick. We don't want Steve to pick. We do not want Steve to pick.
I see. If you don't let me pick, then you beat me automatically.
Yeah. See, that was the plan. Steve, who we going with?
Well, I gotta say, you guys are just reading my mind because at first I was gonna go with Kyle Busch, and of course Kevin took that, and then I was gonna go with older brother Kurt, and Wes took that. So I gotta go to Plan C here. I'm gonna keep the Hendrick train rolling. I'm going with a guy that's been fast. Really had a shot to win both Charlotte races. I'm going with the 88 of Alex Bowman. I'm gonna say that he gets his first career win at the Bristol Motor Speedway on Sunday.
Oh man, at least you added that at Bristol Motor Speedway. I thought you were gonna pull Rick Allen there.
I'm not gonna pull Rick Allen.
Alex Bowman looking for his first win in the Cup Series. But Wes picked Kurt Busch, Steve's got Alex Bowman, and I've got Matt DiBenedetto. Thank you all for watching. We've got Steve, Wes, Kevin, first time appearance by Brandon. I'm your host, Dom Caps. Thank you all for watching, and we'll be back after Bristol, baby. Take care.